Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another high vibe conversation. I'm your host, Shel Shapiro. Joined with me today are the lovely high vibe ladies, and we have an amazing guest with us this week as well, John Chappelear. John, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself for us? Let everybody know who you are.
Um, I'm John Chappelear. I own a company called Changing the Focus. It's based on my book called The Daily Six, which was written based on a gift of devastation, which we can discuss later. But that gift of devastation is one of those gifts that you get given to you that you really would love to return, but there is no return on a gift of devastation. All you can do is go through it and realize that at the end, it really was a gift. But boy, is it a pain while you're going through it. Um, uh, for me, it was family and marriage and business and all sorts of things that crashed and burned, only to come out the other side realizing what an amazing gift that was. And I've coached clients for 20 years, and it's almost always the same thing. This happened. It's been terrible. Oh my God, am I so glad that happened, kind of thing. So that's really the two issues for me are making sure that people realize that things that happen to them can very well be gifts of devastation, depending on how they look at them. And the other one is something Linda and I were talking about earlier, which is that in everything that we do, we have three choices. We can accept it, we can change it, or we can leave it. And the problem that I find with clients is that they tend to not want to accept it, but not want to change and will not leave. And so they end up in some sort of turmoil filled with stress that they have an opportunity to make changes, but change is hard. It takes practice to be confident and comfortable with it. And new behavior is really uncomfortable. So people have a tendency to fly back to old behavior very quickly.
Yeah,
So
that's a great
that's
point,
me.
John. Yeah, that's a great point. And segues very nicely into our topic of discussion for today, which is we have choice, right? And so based on the three things that you get to choose from, whether you get to accept it, change it, or leave it, you get to choose what you do next once you've reached that gift of devastation, if you will, or at other points in your life, even if it's not a devastation, but something that's causing you to shift in some way. And for me, I think we've talked quite a bit about this before. My gift of devastation was burnout. And like that was the biggest one for me that propelled me to change. And I got so sick and tired of being sick and tired that like I couldn't keep doing the same things every day and not getting a different result, which I so desperately wanted and was begging for. And I think the biggest moment for me was realizing that the change needed to come from me. I couldn't keep expecting other people to show up and take it off my plate. I couldn't expect anybody else to change or to want to. It really was the awareness that I had that the change needed to be within me, and that was my choice. And so I'm really grateful for that gift of devastation because it fueled me to make the changes that I needed to be a better version of me, and stop holding myself back. And I know all of you here today can relate to that on some level. Dorit, what have you chosen to change in your life, and how does this affect you?
Well, as you know, I was also given the gift of devastation in the form of a burnout, which left me very ill for 7 years. And the first decision I made was to never, ever, ever go back to that job. And I did not want to have a boss anymore because that was the thing that kind of pushed me, because he was just adding on and adding on and adding on. And me being a people pleaser at the time, just said, yes, of course, I'll fix that. I'll do that. And he didn't provide anyone that would step in if I were ill or had anything to do. So the whole burden was on my shoulders. And of course I crashed. And so we have choice, and I choose to follow my heart. I chose to trust a product that helped me recover, so I could help people and be a force for good in the world. After that, I didn't accept that I was just gonna be ill and not be able to have a value, so to speak. That's what I felt. I felt that my value was decreased because I couldn't give anyone anything back. I needed help with everything from my family, everything from walking the dogs to shopping. The easiest things needed assistance, and it's horrible to be for 7 years and feel like you don't. You can't do anything for anyone. So that's why I became a confidence coach and help people to shine again, to find their inner superpower and to help them see their true value. Yeah.
Isn't your love language gifts like service to others? Isn't that more your love language too? So it really took away what felt like your value.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Jenny, through your gifts of devastation, what were you facing that you had to accept, change, or leave? And which choice did you make to navigate your way through that?
When it comes to devastation, there's been so many gifts.
For the better. For the better.
Yes. And truly, like we were talking about, John, like difficult roads and beautiful endings. It's all about being willing to pause and open up to see the opportunities. And my mind is going so many places, but one of the things I was contemplating is like the difference between being positive and optimistic in this situation, because when we're talking about devastation and seeing the opportunities in that, it doesn't mean that you're not allowing yourself to feel the pain or trying to go under or like squash your emotions down in any way to see the positive. It is absolutely about meeting yourself where you are and keeping your eyes open to see, okay, acceptance, this is where I am, wherein lies the opportunities for me to move forward and grow through all this friction that I'm experiencing. And there's been so much friction in my life. And I have touched on my divorce several times in our conversations. I do believe that one place that I have not really shared from is the loss of my brother, right? My older brother committed suicide when I was about 19. And that for me was a time of really coming back to acceptance of my own experience, because I was coming from a place of surface and showing people the happy face, the happy facade, the girl who was, doing everything right in school. And when I experienced that loss, it was as if the ground beneath me just disappeared. And I found myself in a place where like the old map wasn't working anymore for me. I was in a paradigm shift in my life. And, in that moment, I had some choices to make. Am I going to keep on playing this role or this story that I had going on about who I was? Or would this become an opportunity for me to actually let people in? And I really remember making that choice in several relationships where I allowed people to truly see me. And I remember especially one pastor, actually, who was working at a school where I was studying, who just saw my devastation. I allowed him in, and I remember feeling that I was beautiful. I remember feeling that I was showing all of me in my grief, and I was accepted, and I was cared for, and I was held, and I was loved. And I remember some of that storytelling of me always being the strong one. Really, I left it at that point, moving forward, and it was like as if I was shedding just another layer to become more me and a lighter me. So glad to share that with you. Thank you, Shell.
Thanks, Jody.
Yeah. John, I know in your book you had this beautiful story about how you allowed yourself to be more present in the moment with your son, especially on the day that you had your gift of devastation, your company was taken away from you, and you came home, you're going through all this turmoil in your mind, and your son just wanted you to be there and play. So did you just know that, like, this is what I need to do? Like, was there like an on-off switch with the choice that was clear to make, or like, how did you know that that's what you needed to do in the moment?
I have to attribute it to my son's level of salesmanship. That's, I mean, I absolutely came home with no interest in seeing anybody. I mean, I had spent 13 years building a company from one person and a card table to 12 locations in 3 states and 400 employees, and it was just gone. The one day it was here, the next day it was just gone. I came home that day, and he doesn't know that. He's just standing at the door. Dad's home. Dad's home. This is just great. Dad's home early, and he's home early, kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. Let's just focus on me, not on you. I want to focus on me, and I want to show you how bad I feel and how terrible life is. And he just wouldn't buy into it. It's just like, come on, how kids are. He just puts his hands straight up, like, pick me up, And the weird thing is that after about 10 seconds of ignoring him, he put his hands back up again and said, "It's good for you." And I have no idea where that came from, other than maybe my wife was coaching him or something. Tell daddy, playing with you will be good for you. But it seemed awfully spontaneous at the time. And I thought, yeah, what the heck? What am I going to lose, kind of thing? Another business. So I picked him up. And we were walking around and, sort of got him on my hip, and he's talking about all the important things in his life, Snuffleupagus and all the other things on Sesame Street, and how he's been riding around on the vacuum cleaner, and, and we started chasing each other around the house. And I won't go into the details of towels and snapping and all the other things, but we were just running around the house. And I know if you have kids, you understand what a child's laughter sounds like. And his laughter hit me like a jacuzzi hits knotted up and tight muscles. And the more that he laughed, the more relaxed I became, and the easier I became, and the more open I became, until we ended up in the rec room, laying on the floor with me on my back and holding him above me, having him looking down at me, laughing uncontrollably. And I realized at that point in my life, if I could change my focus from where I was when I walked in the door to where I was 10 minutes later, maybe less than that, in a positive frame of mind, ready to sort of change from poor me to what's going on out here, I could do that anytime I wanted, any day I wanted to, if I just was willing to be open to what's going on around me, rather than my focus needs to stop being here and start being here.
I love that just overall shift that you embraced, because it kind of just like your body just welcomed it. Your mind was just like, all right, this is what's happening and I'm here for it. And so I feel like there's something so powerful about that. Stina, what's coming up for you when we talk about having choice and gifts of devastation and making the decisions to accept it, change it, or leave it?
Yeah, I love that you just asked John about his son, because I was thinking about my kids and a conversation I recently had with them. I was like going over the last 2 years of my life with my kids, like what has happened in life, because it's easy to just sort of like drag your kids through life, for lack of a better way to put it. They just kind of ride the waves and bumps. They don't really understand all of the moving pieces and all of the components that our adult, brains are like putting together on a daily basis. They're not looking at the bank accounts. They're not looking at the work schedule. They're not communicating with clients. Like their world is much more myopic. And so I was giving them this story and realizing like I was adding like all of the things that I had learned. It wasn't a story like as it was happening, which would have been pretty traumatic for them to be informed about every step of the way. It was more of that like zoomed out, here's what happened, here are the choices I made, here's why I made those choices. And it all started because we were talking about money and how when you're in control of your own money, right, as an adult, there's this balance between not just saying, oh, I can't afford it, or I can't have that, or I don't have the money for it, and just spending, right? So we can't just be one extreme or the other, because there are times in life that are up and there are times in life that are down. And when you're in a time that's up, you want to make the best use of your resources and, enjoy that time. And when times are down, you want to know how to make intentional decisions with your money, how to decide what you actually need to pay for and what can wait and what can, be saved for or be put off. And like they're both okay and they're both good, because what I've experienced from some like money mindset kind of like brainwashing, for lack of a better way to put that, is that, if you're saying you can't afford it, then it means that you have a lack mindset and you just, haven't been resourceful enough. Well, on a daily basis, you can't just go into every store and just uncontrollably spend on whatever you see that you want so that you can prove to yourself you're in an abundant mindset. So, not using those things against ourselves and really truly being in choice means that you're choosing for the things that matter and you are really focused on that. And like for John, in that moment, it's like you're making that choice based on the energy that's available to you, like whether it's your calendar that's full or your bank account that's almost empty or whatever. When things are destroyed or like devastated, like you're left with only a little bit, and then you're like, okay, this is all I have right now. What am I going to do with it? And I found that it's either anxiety or being deliberate. Like those are the two options. You can either like stew in the anxiety, go back to the old patterns and ruminate and drive yourself crazy, or you can like stop, pause, like actually like ask yourself the question, like, what am I going to do next? What is my next step? What do I actually want? And getting really deliberate about it. And those two things are like constantly in I guess partnership in a way, or like battling each other, where when the anxiety comes up, the deliberateness goes down. When your deliberateness goes up, your anxiety wants to keep trying to like pull it back down into the anxiety, but you have to strengthen that skill set. And like John said, it's so challenging to adopt those new behaviors. It takes so much more effort. And I've been finding that just with the anxiety that I've experienced, it's like anxiety is actually a lot of certainty for my mind, because it knows that it can stew about these things forever And it knows that in action, it knows what's going to happen. If I don't do anything, it knows what's going to happen. Nothing. Like nothing's going to change. There's not going to be any new results or any new risks. But doing something else, like being courageous or being curious, takes so much more brain power. It takes so much more of you to generate those things. And so it takes that deliberate practice and like returning your focus to those things. And it really only does take that moment. I took my like power nap today, and I've practiced like putting the weighted blanket on and laying down and being like shutting everything else off, everything else that's going on, and just feeling that like physically in my body, like being wrapped in a hug, being wrapped in love, and just like being with myself for those 15 minutes. And it feels like an eternity sometimes because I'm so disconnected from all of the other things.
I love that full body
Can
reset.
Can I?
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that up, Stina, because often when my clients come to me, they're in a situation where they're like, I have to act. I have to make a decision. I have to do. And what you're bringing up is that it's more about that taking a few steps back and that perspective and seeking out your sense of clarity, which means slowing down, and then how clarity leads to action. And that's such a comfort to be reminded of when we're in that stressful state of do. And also when if I have this inner monologue going on, like, Jenny, what's your decision? What's your choice? It is immediately followed by, well, what do you want? And we love that topic. What do you want? And that means like, know yourself. Truly know yourself. Okay, that's just mine. Thank you.
Linda, what's coming up for you when we talk about choice?
Oh, I'm glad I got a little break in the action because Jenny had me tearing up like crazy. Oh, man. My gifts of devastation. The first one was losing my father to suicide when I was between junior and senior year, right at the end of the summer. And I was the strong one. That's probably the numbing out I chose. And so I let my mom and my brother cry and comforted them. And Stina knows this one. It's like, I don't have anything to wear to the funeral. I went, got a pattern, got fabric, made a dress. Stay busy, keep your mind off things. And about a month later, I just started crying. I got triggered by a friend. She came over. I knew she was coming, but I didn't know she had arrived. And so all of a sudden there was this Linda coming up my stairs. And I just went, like, I was to my limit. I couldn't take any more. What else has happened? And when I found out it wasn't anything, I just burst into tears and I couldn't stop. She was so upset. She felt so bad. She finally just went home because there wasn't anything she could do. And I ended up just sitting in my father's closet, smelling the smell of him, and cried, and I could not stop. It went on for like 2 weeks. It was insane. I mean, obviously I stopped, but mainly I just cried all the time. And so my mom sent me to pastor at our church he had lost his wife to suicide. And we just sat on the couch in his office and said nothing. And it was so healing. And then we just started talking about our loved ones that we were missing so desperately. And even funny stories, and it was so beautiful. And then in January, I was going to become a dancer when I got out of high school, a professional dancer, and I had a gymnastics accident. And my gift of devastation there was that I had gotten my life so entwined that it's kind of like nobody else could step in easily. So I kind of just like made myself the key person, if you will, at least in my mind. And my mom I remember her sitting on my bed going, it's all going to work out. The world's going to go on without you. I was like, oh, and it was such a relief to me that I didn't have to do all of it, be the strong person, be the person who, was sort of the stabilizer or whatever. And it did, it all worked out. So those were my 2 gifts of devastation.
I feel like we all just need to take a deep breath now and like just let it all out. But this is not a therapy session, so we'll save that for another day. John, now that you've heard all of our abridged versions of our gifts of devastation and how we navigate choice for ourselves, what's the next step for either for us or for anyone who's tuning in to be able to make choices for themselves too? Like what do they need to do next? What should they be thinking about?
And I were talking yesterday or the day before, and the point we came up with is a clarity or an alignment of goals or values. If my goals are aligned or my values are aligned, it makes the decisions I make easy. If I know the kind of person I want to be, or I know the kind of person I want to become, it makes it much easier for me to make a decision whether this is moving me closer or not. And if it's moving me closer, then it's easy to say yes. And if it's moving me further away or not moving me forward, then I can say no. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but the key is the clarity of the direction you want to go. And that takes practice. The reason I wrote the book, The Daily 6, is because it's daily. This isn't read something and everybody's better. I wish it was, but it isn't. And it's not as if we don't have enough stuff that's going on out here, enough noise that's going on around here that pulls us in so many different directions. So that the next thing that you would do would be based on where you currently are. If I was still outside the door, I hadn't come in yet, I hadn't run into my son yet, I might want to just sit down somewhere and try to practice a sense of mindfulness, just trying to center myself at a point where I am in the present moment, non-judgmentally, and with no particular agenda, just be here, and then see what comes up from that. If I've already been in and I've already learned a little bit from Dayton, then it would be, well, maybe what I should do is try to be Dayton for other people. Maybe I should be the person who can sort of go over and crack their shell and open them up a little bit and allow that emotion to escape a little bit. So the thing that I've learned over time, and I picked it up from something I read a long time ago, is that as far as I'm concerned, there are 2 emotions and only 2 emotions. There's fear and love. And everything negative, anxiety that we were talking about earlier, all these things there's some level of fear associated with, if I do this is going to happen and it's not going to be good. And the other side of the coin for me is the things that are the emotions that are positive should and can all be driven from a sense and position of love. And so the way I define love in the Daily 6 is understanding the needs of others and treating those needs as important as if they were my own. And that's it. There's nothing else associated with it. Just make sure that not more important and not less important. And that tends to be where I find a lot of people these days, is that, we were talking about being, Linda was just talking about being, the person who takes care of everything, so her needs are definitely not as important as everybody else's needs. So she puts those over here and she takes care of all of this. And the reality is that my needs and my values and what's important to me are just as important as everybody else is. And so I have to, and this is one of the things that was problematic for me with the book. And I don't want to go too far on this, but when I wrote the book originally, I wrote it from my standpoint, which was a completely self-centered, hubris-covered shell of a person. And then I realized there's a whole lot of people out there who are also on the other side of that, completely giving, totally focused on the needs of others. The nurses and teachers and caring social worker type of people who are just live their lives to give to other people. And that's what we were talking about earlier, burnout, the idea of, I give so much because, it's either demanded of me and I say yes, or I give so much because it's just built into me. And I need to learn how to say no. I get, every time I say something like that, another tangent of being in a workshop teaching somebody to say no. I was in a 3-day workshop teaching people, and one woman was talking about the fact she could never say no to anybody. And so that was all I did. Every time I pointed to her in the workshop for 3 straight days, all she had to do was say no. And at the end of 3 days, she said, things at home have changed amazingly. I was like, well, isn't that amazing? She said, I was able to say no to my husband when he said this, and my kids were like, and I could say no to them. And it's just like, life changes through a series of choices that are small, incremental moving forward. Small changes practiced consistently create dramatic results. If we're looking to bite off life into huge chunks of choice, probably you'll never get there, because that's what happens when new behavior rears its ugly head, is that I've gone out too far into the land of the new, and I've got to come back to the land of the safe. And so we have to begin to step out a little bit, but you can only step out a little at a time, and then trust. And these are not things that come easily. If you've not been a trusting person, you're not going to just wake up tomorrow and go, okay, I trust everybody. It just isn't going to happen. So accepting the fact that things aren't going to get better right away, accepting the fact that your life is where it is. I mean, I think that was a really good point. I mean, we are where we are. It's like in recovery, they talk about one day at a time. Well, guess what, folks? You don't have to be in recovery. You still only have one day at a time. That's all we've got. So all I can work on is this moment, this day, get a little bit further along, but make sure my goals are clear and that my values are aligned. And then I have a choice as to what to do next.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even a day by day thing. Sometimes it's an hour by hour thing, a moment by moment thing. Like, what do I need right now? And then what's the next thing that needs to happen? And so it's those micro choices that will create the bigger habit, the bigger pattern, and the bigger change. Thank you so much for joining us today, John, for choosing and making the choice to be here with us, because we certainly appreciate having this conversation with you. Thank you to the High Vibe ladies for joining me for another High Vibe conversation. To everybody that has tuned in today or catching the replay, please let us know what choices you are making, what you're struggling with, what you found most helpful, and we will be sure to jump in and continue the conversation with you.